The first U.S. canine corona case has been reported in New York. What's the significance? Are there more to come? Answers to these and other questions about canine corona coming up next. So, hello fellow pet lovers. Good morning. How in the world are you today? Today we're going to talk about the first U.S. dog testing positive for coronavirus. We're going to find out more about killer toads and what's happening in Florida at this very moment. And Los Angeles is discovering yet more problems from the environment. Mosquitoes are on the rise, and they're bringing with it encephalitis. That and more to come. Thank you all for joining me here today. We'll be open for, I think we'll take questions. I got a couple questions in email this week. One was about the mosquitoes, so we started talking about, we'll talk about that for sure. If you have any other questions that arise from time to time, type them into the chat, left, right, up, or down. I have no idea. If you're on a mobile, it could be with a little hashtag box in the bottom, but we're going to get right into this, I think. City of New York this month. First dog in the U.S. has tested positive for coronavirus. As you know, as we've been following things, dogs have been scattered all over the place. The first little thing was that Pomeranian in Hong Kong, Netherlands, around the world. Dogs are popping up here and there that are testing for coronavirus. This was a German Shepherd. He was presented to his veterinarian because he had signs of respiratory illness. This is all documented not by just the news service, by the USDA, APHIS. Yeah, that APHIS is the people that supervise animal, plant, and health service. They're the ones that accreditate veterinarians for interstate shipment of dogs, cats, ferrets, horses, and anything that's important. The situation was exactly what we would expect, as we've been talking about over these last period of time, as this coronavirus has been developing and terrifying the population, so to speak, and that's all of us pet owners worrying about our dogs and our cats. The owners got sick first. So the owners got sick, the dog got sick, took them to the veterinarian. The veterinarian had a high-level concern because the owners were sick, not necessarily because the dog was sick, because the canine symptoms are generally of mild upper respiratory infection that would mimic zillions of other mild upper respiratory infections that we have in the infectious upper respiratory disease complex that we used to call kennel cough. That was pretty simple, but now I have to remember canine infectious upper respiratory disease complex, which unfortunately we're going to have to sneak the suspicion of coronavirus in there somewhere. So what happened with this dog is that it basically got better without too much of an issue. I have no report on the owners of the dog, but it was the same familiar scenario. There was a second dog in the household, though, as well, and that second dog was never sick, but he had eventually showed antibody titers. So he was exposed as well, but never showed any signs of illness. That's a data point that we need to kind of keep track of as this zoonoses, emerging disease that emerges. Each data point is important to keep track of and to document and to understand. I think understand is the right term, because, you know, rabies breaks out. We don't have to understand it. We've got decades of what happened to dogs and people when they get bit, starting from Old Yeller and going forward. But now we understand pretty much consistently the fact that this dog erupted one out of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of exposures, And it's the same scenario, Mild sickness in a family, in a household that's positive for coronavirus. So we're now understanding, at least consistently, that dogs and cats apparently are end-stage hosts. There is absolutely no evidence that dogs and cats have ever transmitted it back to people, and we like that. Mink, which we talked about previously, are another, and the whole family of Mosquitoes with ferrets and the like, are another story. They apparently can, if they're have active infections, may be transmitted back to people. That's what happened on those mink farms back in Holland. So in conclusion, I think it's very important that these episodes are very consistent. And if they were a little bit here and a little bit there and a different story and the like, we could start worrying about A, whether we have any understanding at all, or B, whether the virus is changing. Because viruses can and do change, and sometimes they change for the better, but sometimes with serial passage they change for the worse, and we don't like anything changing for the worse when we already have a situation that's pretty much, as far as we're concerned, as far as I'm concerned, it couldn't be much worse. So, first U.S. dog positive, similar scenario around the world. We're going to continue to watch and be vigilant. If you do have a dog or a cat and you are sick with coronavirus, somebody else should be taking care of it, if at all possible. And that's pretty much the name of that tune. So, actually I want to jump to one other. I kind of glossed over something that I probably should have thrown up in that group. There was a cat in Minnesota. Don't know where my slide is, but there was a cat in Minnesota, and that cat in Minnesota, same similar scenario. Mild upper respiratory infection, came in, veterinarian treated, any history of illness in the family, yes, somebody's got coronavirus, cat's tested for coronavirus, cat's positive. Cat recovers with basic general care and symptomatic treatment, and we all lived happily ever after. So I think that scenario is going to pop up here and there, pretty much everywhere. We don't really have any reports in California so far, but I don't think that's, I think it's a matter of time before more isolated episodes of that occur. As long as this virus doesn't decide to change, I think that's going to be the status quo for a long period of time until we get more herd immunity in the human population, and if someone actually delivers on the promises of all these vaccines that we keep hearing about. I wonder what happens if I click that. I think we're still here. That's good. So, killer toads. I grew up in the Midwest, Cincinnati, vacationed around the tri-state area around there. My favorite hobby in the summer was to go out and catch toads. I like those little things hopping around at night, and it was just great and fun, and I'd catch 200 or 300 of them. That was an exaggeration, and then turn them loose and start it all over again the next night if I could. They're not the same toads, by the way. Right now, Florida has, I think we'll call it an outbreak. That may not be exactly the right term, but there's these things are big toads, and this mess in Florida was brought on by, I hate to say it, but they brought it on themselves. Apparently the sugar industry was having problems with insects eating the sugar cane plants, whatever, and so someone decided to bring this South American toad up so that it could take out the insects. Well, it turns out, A, it didn't work very well. The toads decided to like salamanders and other small mammals because they're pretty big enough to grab lizards and newts and things that are floating around their ecosystem, and it didn't help the cotton population at all. And now you got these toads running around creating a problem. Their only problem during the rainy season in Florida, the rainy season is pretty much now. Weather's warming up. Of course, it's pretty much warm in Florida all the time. These toads somehow they live underground pretty much year-round. Come out at night and do their foraging for not insects and protecting the cotton. Sugar. Did I say cotton before? It's supposed to be sugar. But unfortunately, the sugar is not protected by the frogs. The problem with the frogs is, I don't know, let's go back to this one slide. I don't know if you can see this thing or not, but they got these big bulbous glands. Will this blow up? My on screen share? Oops. I think so. So they got these big bulbous glands right here. And they got this milky, evil substance in it. Highly toxic, highly irritating. So this little hoppy toad's going around the backyard at night, and your dog gets out and he grabs one of these things. The toad, whether he punctures it or not, doesn't matter, because their protective mechanism is when they're startled or attacked, they explode this stuff. It gets in the dog's eyes, it gets in the dog's nose, it gets in the dog's mouth. It's highly toxic. It can kill them in 15 minutes if they get enough. And I'm not talking about Chihuahuas here. I'm talking about Bernese Mountain Dogs and German Shepherds and anything big enough to grab one and get enough into them. You got a problem. So, the toxins trigger an immediate antitoxin reaction. They start foaming. Even if the toxin doesn't kill them and create seizures, the amount of foaming to get in their mouth and their nose, they can strangle themselves and suffocate from all the secretions. It's a pretty evil type thing. So, independent of Florida's lack of wisdom of bringing these things into Florida, the normal ecosystem in the Sonoran Desert, South U.S., most of all Mexico, has, well, I think they're called Sonoran Desert toads, Colorado River toads. They're very closely related to these varmints back in Florida. The only difference, they live underground, they're pretty happy. The only difference is they're triggered to come out and mate. It's the mating, that's why they're coming out in hordes. But they're triggered to come out with water, and the water system, not the water system, but the Sonoran Desert's a desert. This should never happen. But there's a monsoon type thing that happens, I think, early summer, like July-ish, if I'm not mistaken. Oh my God, there's someone on the phone that's on the line that lives out there that's had problems with these, I think. Anyway, maybe you can tell us when toad season is, Lori.
It starts the middle of June, and they start coming out as soon as the first monsoon hits.
How long does the monsoon season last there?
Till September.
Till September. Wow. Mercy. I was hoping to like 3 weeks. So I don't know if you all heard that. June through September, it rains in the Sonoran Desert. Lori's out in the general Tucson area, and that's kind of the center of things. I don't think these things go much farther north than, I don't think they get up to the Grand Canyon. I don't know why. I don't think they're called Colorado River toads, but I think it's the south part of Arizona up to like Phoenix. Is that about right?
That'd be about right.
Okay. So you're at risk for Months. That's evil. So I had some guidelines on how to protect your yard. Maybe you can just take the lecture over. Um,
You have to treat them like you do rattlesnakes and close every opening in your yard up and keep it clear of debris because you don't want the monsoons to flood your yard. They come out every night, the toads do, and they come back to the same spot, so when you finally do catch them, you have to take them far away or they'll be back in your yard.
oh my gosh.
And they're out on the golf course at night, and the slop, when they become, when they go into their danger mode, the slop that comes off, if it gets on you, it also can make you sick.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the best. I mean, toddlers and youngsters running around playing with the toads are at risk, but in general, they're not going to put the thing in their mouth and get as much of a dose as, like, a dog interested in grabbing one of these little guys and gets in his mouth, and he's in trouble. All that toxin's there, and all that venom's there, and all the irritation's there, and the secretions basically they're gonna suffocate before they die of a seizure or something like that. If general, I mean, what should you do? Get them to the nearest garden hose, and I'm gonna say something I probably shouldn't have. Almost drown them. I mean, you're better off getting them, making them act like they just got out of the pool, coughing and gagging and snorkeling. Most of them, you can just rinse it off with a hose as much as you can, and then get them to your vet. Don't wait to get them to the vet. Hose them down, but not the wet. You're not treating heat stroke. You're treating toad stroke in their mouth. I just made that up.
There's also people that do like rattlesnake avoidance training. They do toad avoidance training.
Wow, you're a wealth of information. I think that's great. So, I've seen rattlesnake training in action. Well, have you done that with your dogs, Lori?
We were gone last summer to Montana, so no, we didn't. But if we come back the 1st of September like last year, yes, we are. And by the way, that rattlesnake training is unbelievable. We did a recheck with Ruby and Ginger this year in March when the rattlesnakes came back. And Ruby realized it was a rattlesnake 20 yards away in our driveway and wouldn't go near it.
Wow. Fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah, I used to hike, my podiatrist had border collies, and they lived up in Tehunga Canyon, and their backyard had snakes crawling through it almost every night, so they did the rattlesnake training with their dogs, and we used to go up and hike with them once or twice a month or so, and we'd get out of the car and say hi and play with the dogs, and then we'd go out for a walk, and Dan would say, keep your dogs behind. I'm not quite sure who his lead dog was. I think it was Ranger or something like that. If there's a snake up ahead, he'll tell us. And sure enough, the dog got within, I don't know, wasn't very far of it, and was running around, came back yelling and yipping and thing, and we put all the dogs on a leash and skirted around it. It was amazing. So if you decide to move to Tucson or Arizona or Florida, get toad avoidance training for sure. If you are traveling and you're out at night, keep your kids on a leash, take a flashlight, and don't let them in any brushy type things or leafy type things or garbage type things or any type of thing that my dogs like to stick their nose in as we're on the trail. Fortunately, they're nocturnal, so during the day you've got less risk, but at night you can't see anything, so you got huge risk. And like Lori said, keep all the brush and everything away, and if there's danger of flooding, try to make sure that doesn't happen around the property as best you can, because they're going to like the water. and they're not coming out really looking for you. They're looking for food, so you want to eliminate their food source if at all possible. And their food is, yes, they do like insects, but they're big, so they like lizards and things like that, and even really small mammals. So stay away from toads, or at least keep your kids away from them. Four-legged, two-legged, every one. So, how are we doing on time here? Mosquitoes. Nobody likes mosquitoes. The biggest problem right now is it's, at least where we're at, we've had unseasonably large rains sporadic all over the place. It's now we actually had a little rain this morning, enough to add some water to the pool. Pretty amazing for this time of year, I think. I don't know what really the weather patterns are going to be for the rest of the summer, but right now it's nice and damp, and I've got little things going around the house and around my ears from time to time already this year. So most counties, and not necessarily municipal districts, but health districts, which include pretty much coverage throughout all the states, have vector control programs, of which mosquito monitoring here in Southern California is certainly one of them. And they actually trap in mosquitoes and test them for various things, mostly viral diseases that can be transmitted to people, and unfortunately dogs and cats potentially as well. And so this week, mosquitoes in Hacienda Heights were tested positive for both West Nile virus and the St. Louis encephalitis virus. St. Louis encephalitis virus is actually, at least statistically, on the way out. No explanation why. As the West Nile, it used to be around much more prevalently decades ago, but when the West Nile virus came this way after the 2001-2002 outbreak in the horses in New York, the St. Louis went down and the West Nile went up. St. Louis is a pretty mild type thing compared to some of the even fatalities that you can get with West Nile. So everybody's got their antenna up, pardon that metaphor, trying to keep track of whether or not this is going to be a really bad year or just hopefully a below average year. But with the environment that we have right now, doesn't look good. So West Nile virus causes a type of encephalitis. Encephalitis is an inflammation of the brain, which you don't want. There's no treatment for, and no specific antiviral, anti-West Nile virus treatment that we can, that public health can prescribe or the doctors can prescribe. It's all symptomatic and supportive, and pray your immune system takes you back to normal. Transmitted solely by mosquitoes. The reservoir are birds. Birds like to have reservoir of a lot of viral type things. Influenza is the most popular thing that they flock around with. But the animal bites the bird. The mosquito bites the bird. The mosquito can bite any mammal that it wants, because mosquitoes feed on mammals. They like blood. And then you become infected. So it's transmitted from people to mosquito bites, and there's no cure. So 1 in 5 will develop symptoms, 4 in 5 will not. Plan on being one of the 4 and 5, I think. The symptoms in dogs, I put in cats. There's been some reports in cats, but they're relatively immune to this type situation, at least from our ability to sort things out. But the canine symptoms are very similar to the symptoms in people, headaches, aches, pains, nauseous. Um, Biggest thing that's different from influenza type infections would be a skin rash, which is relatively common. You can have the condition for days or even months. Doesn't sound like something that I want to subscribe to. In the worst cases, you get fever, depression, neurologic symptoms of incoordination, muscle weakness, even seizures. So if you have any symptoms like that, or your dog is showing things like that, get them to your veterinarian, me, or wherever you're at on the planet, for sure. The severe symptoms will include highlighting the coma and paralysis and death. This occurs in people, folks, as well as domestic animals. And so it's a severe public health threat. And fortunately for us, we have what they call vector control, which is a division of the Public Health Service, and they're out actually monitoring mosquitoes and other things. It came from horses that were, well, I shouldn't say it came from. The virus itself, when you say West Nile, it comes from Africa, the Mediterranean area, the North Africa, Cairo, Egypt, the Nile Valley, and then around to the northern part, the southern part of Europe, and the Mediterranean Valley is where it's endemic. So it popped up in this country, in New York, in racehorses in 1999, with a mortality, not morbidity rate. Morbidity is how many catch it. A mortality rate of like 39% of the horses that got it didn't survive this infection. And at that time, there were Delaware, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, that little cluster up around the city. Big racetrack situation up there, which is why all the horses were there. There was another outbreak in 2001, pretty much all across the East Coast, and then it started migrating west. So we now call it the West Nile virus for horses, and horses alone, not people, not dogs, not cats, not anything else. For horses, there's a vaccine, and so if you do have horses floating around somewhere, I urge you to double check their vaccine status and get your four-legged whinnying friends vaccinated according to your veterinarian's recommendations. Other viruses that people get, which haven't been identified yet so far by the screening and vector control, that actually do have equine virus. Strike that. Vaccinations for all of these E-viruses. Equine encephalomyelitis virus, Venezuelan equine, there's Western, there's Eastern, and there's Venezuelan. So Venezuelan equine encephalitis virus, Eastern equine encephalitis virus, and Western equine encephalitis virus, all transmitted by mosquitoes. Get your horses vaccinated. So I think, so they're also identifying this virus, the Western Nile virus, in other species in addition to dogs. Gray squirrels are the biggest population of it, and if that's the case, they may act as a reservoir, because we got zillions of gray squirrels here in Southern California, all over California. Mountain goats has been identified in, domestic goats and sheep, fox squirrels, and alpacas. Alpacas may not be that surprising. I don't know how dangerous it is, but and the like. But that's something to watch out for. We've got a lot of alpacas and llamas in my neighborhood right now. So what can you do? What should you do? Well, get rid of the stuff that your toads don't want, I think, for sure. Standing water, get rid of standing water, get rid of standing water, and get rid of standing water. That's the name of the game. I would encourage you to take a walk out on your property sometime soon and just look at the ground and look for wet spots. Runoff from gutters and little pools can create a little pool of standing water that you have no idea about. If it lasts for more than a week, you got a mosquito breeding factory that you had no idea about. If you got potted plants with saucers and they don't dry out every 7 days, I'm not a botanist, I don't know if that's good or bad for your plants. I'm told it's not good for your plants, but if it doesn't dry out every 7 days, you're breeding mosquitoes right there. If your pool or your jacuzzi isn't properly chlorinated, you're breeding mosquitoes in your pool and your jacuzzi, which is probably right next to your house. Water buckets, pails, things that are sitting around that left over from a construction project, an old paint can sitting around, fills up with water. You've got tons of mosquitoes in that. We have basically dish pans with bleach in it that set up at all the entrances of the house to control viral infections going into the house, like parvovirus and the like. Those would be a primary place for the mosquitoes, except we change those every 24 hours. There are actually some species of mosquitoes that carry pathogens that can breed and reproduce at the water line and lay their eggs above the water line that can actually live and reproduce without standing water. Those are kind of scary. I can't remember the species. I think I know what's on the tip of my tongue, and I'm not sure it's right, so I'm not going to say it. But we have them here in Southern California, and they, I think they're capable of transmitting Zika, if I'm not mistaken. But the take home on your mosquito abatement is no standing water. Dump it once a week. You'll really be good and thankful. The most important thing before we end is to remember the mosquitoes transmit heartworms. Dogs and cats die of heartworms all the time. And heartworms can be prevented safely with a monthly medication. If your kids aren't on it, think twice and get them back on it if they're not. That's all for me for today. It's me, Dr. B, signing off. Have a great, healthy, and successful puppy and kitty day. So, any questions? If any, see if we can I can hear somebody. Go ahead.
It's Lori.
Hi, Lori.
Is there any vaccine for that encephalitis in a dog?
No. No canine encephalitis vaccine.
Okay. We're going to see you in 2 weeks with Ginger.
How's Ginger doing?
She needs her teeth cleaned bad. And you're going to see Ruby the next day for a checkup.
We can fix both of them.
Well, fixing Ruby means you have to do brain surgery.
Well, I'll read up on that between now and the next 2 weeks. How's that?
Okay.
It's good to hear you, Lori. Give my best to your other half and to Mom.
Yep, and we'll see you in 2.
Super. Go ahead.
I've known Dr. B since I was 12 years old. That's 48 years ago.
I'm glad you got a memory for that, because I knew you before you grew up, but I had no idea it was that long.
Yep.
Wow. That's fantastic. Stay away from the toads.
Yes.
Okay. So if there are no other questions, let me refresh the chat here and make sure there's nothing glaring at me. So until next time, it's me, Dr. B, signing off. Have a great and healthy kitty and puppy day. I can't wait to see you in the next session. Thanks for joining me today. If this video was a benefit, please subscribe and hit the bell below. Most importantly, please share these videos with your friends so that they and their pets can benefit as well. Thanks.